The smoke was a thick black monster, clawing its way through every room of the old wooden house. Flames licked at the walls, devouring memories and turning a home into a funeral pyre. Firefighter David was on his final sweep, the heat pressing in on him, his oxygen tank a ticking clock. "Clear!" he shouted into his radio, his voice raspy. "I'm coming out!" Every instinct, every year of training told him to retreat. The roof groaned above him, threatening to collapse. But as he turned to leave, a faint sound cut through the roar of the fire. A desperate, high-pitched meow. He froze. Protocol was clear. No unnecessary risks. A pet was a tragedy, but a fallen firefighter was a catastrophe. The rest of his team was already outside, battling the blaze from a safer distance. No one would blame him for leaving. But the sound came again, not a cry of fear, but one of defiance. It was coming from the master bedroom, the heart of the inferno. David made a split-second decision that went against the rulebook, but aligned with his soul. He pushed forward into the suffocating heat. The bedroom was a vision of hell. The bed was ablaze, the curtains had vanished into ash, and the air was shimmering with heat. There, under the smoldering frame of the bed, were two glowing green eyes. It was Mittens, the family's calico cat. He'd seen her picture on the mantelpiece on his way in. "Come on, girl," David coaxed, his voice muffled by his mask. "Let's get you out of here." He reached for her, but the cat didn't run into his arms. Instead, she let out a guttural hiss, a sound so fierce it seemed impossible from such a small creature. She wasn't scared. She was guarding something. "I'm trying to help you," David yelled over the crackling flames. But Mittens wouldn't budge. She pressed herself lower to the floor, her body a shield. David was confused. Why would a cat choose certain death over rescue? The structure moaned again, a final warning. It was now or never. He dropped to his belly, the floor hot enough to melt his gloves, and peered under the bed. What he saw made the air freeze in his lungs, a sight so unexpected it defied all logic. Tucked behind Mittens, nestled in a small hollow she had cleared on the floorboards, was a writhing pile of tiny, furless creatures, newborn kittens. So small, their eyes were still sealed shut. They were utterly helpless, blind to the fiery world they had been born into. Mittens hadn't been cowering in fear. She had been protecting her children. She had chosen to face the fire, to use her own body as a barrier against the heat, rather than abandon her babies. The realization hit David with the force of a physical blow. He wasn't just looking at a pet, he was witnessing the raw, primal power of a mother's love. Time was gone. There was no more thinking, only acting. "I've got you," David whispered, a promise to the brave mother. "I've got all of you." With a gentleness he didn't know he possessed, he reached past Mittens and began scooping the fragile kittens into his helmet. 1, 2, 3, 4. Mittens watched his every move, her green eyes wide with a mixture of terror and trust. She seemed to understand. Once the last kitten was secured, she finally relaxed her defensive stance and rubbed against his hand, a silent thank you. He cradled the helmet in one arm and scooped up the soot-covered mother with the other. "We're going now," he declared, turning his back to the inferno. He ran, fueled by an adrenaline he'd never known. The roof finally gave way behind them, sending a shower of sparks and collapsing beams where they had been just seconds before. As he burst out of the front door and into the cool night air, his team stared in disbelief. They saw their comrade, covered in soot, holding a cat in one arm and his helmet with the other. A paramedic rushed over. David carefully handed over the helmet. The paramedic peered inside, and his jaw dropped. The other firefighters gathered around, their tough exteriors melting away as they saw the tiny precious cargo. They were silent. The rage of the fire, the sirens, the shouting, it all faded into the background. In that moment, there was only the quiet miracle of the 6 lives that had been saved from the ashes. Mittens, safe in a warm blanket, immediately began to nurse her kittens, her purr a small engine of life in the midst of destruction. David knelt beside them, tears he didn't know were there, mixing with the soot on his face. Sometimes, the greatest courage isn't found in facing down an enemy you can see, but in refusing to abandon the ones you love, no matter how hopeless the flames around you burn.